Nikki here. I'm here today to do my spoiler-filled review for Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. Like I said, this will be my spoiler-filled review for it. So if you're not wanting to be spoiled, I'll include a link below for my spoiler-free video. Otherwise, just click off if you're not interested in listening to the review for this book at all. So to start, I'll tell you a little bit about the book. It is a sci-fi with, I would say, a subgenre in humor. You really can't get away from the humor, and I feel like it's a really important part to remember to mention because it is so integrated into the story. It's a really fun read. It's a really terrific listen. Stephen Fry does one of the copies of the audiobook. That's the copy I listened to. He also, fun fact, is the narrator in the movie that they did in 2005. The way he reads the audiobook and the emotion and the silliness he puts into the voices just really enhances the experience of it. So I really recommend listening to the one he narrates if you're looking for an audiobook version of this to listen to. Like I said, it is so much fun. It is crazy and goofy and filled with awesome descriptions that make no sense, but you still understand, and it's just good. The story itself is two groups that end up kind of fusing into one, and you have the first group is Arthur, Dent, and Prefect. They're escaping Earth on Demolition Day, and they just are hitchhiking to survive, and it gets them into a kind of funky situation with the second group. The second group is Trillian and Zaphod Beeblebrox. They steal a top-of-the-line spaceship for a harebrained adventure. And the top-of-the-line part of it is that it has this infinity drive, and there's tons of these weird infinity drive-related antics. It's a crazy story that can you laugh the entire way across. And you find out that they're looking for a supercomputer to find the ultimate answer, only to find that there's a bigger supercomputer who's trying to figure out what the ultimate question is. And honestly, when you read this, the most important thing to remember is don't panic. I'll go into my likes and dislikes here for this book. They're very similar to the ones in my spoiler-free one. I just go a little more in depth here. My first like is the crazy goofy characters with just the incredibly silly antics, and I love they all seem to kind of have their own agendas and their own personalities, and they're all just a little bit dysfunctional, a little bit neurotic, and it just makes them very, very fun to read. And all these different things are going on. So like you have Arthur Dent, who's a little overwhelmed, and you have Prefect, who was an alien but doesn't really look like an alien. He just looks off, and just tons of things. And I'll go into a little more into depth once I get into the character section. But yeah, no, the characters were definitely 100% a strong point here. My second like is Douglas Adams' descriptions. Again, they're brilliant, and they're fun, and they're very accurate and very visual. Like I believe at one point he describes someone getting caught by surprise when he says, when you're cruising down the road in the fast lane and you lazily sail past a few hard-driving cars and are feeling pretty pleased with yourself, and then accidentally change down from fourth to first instead of to third, making your engine leap out of your bonnet in a rather ugly mess. It tends to throw you off your stride in pretty much the same way this remark threw off Ford. That's what I mean, like just the descriptions are a little long and they could be said in one or two words, but the effect is so much more pronounced when he describes it like that. My third like is the fast-paced nature. Things are constantly happening, you're constantly jumping forward, and it's a lot of fun. It keeps you engaged the entire time because it's constantly pushing the story forward without pausing too much for unnecessary prose. My dislikes for this one are that sometimes it's hard to follow. Rather than a jump forward, it jumps sideways. There's a few times here where it makes a tangent based on a thought someone is having, and I found that very jolting the first time I read it. It did pull me out of the experience a little bit, but once I knew to expect it, it wasn't as big of an issue. But if you weren't expecting it and you're reading the book for the first time, I found that could be very jolting and a little bit disorienting for the reader. The other one dislike I'm going to mention here is that the book is overly silly. It's not typically one I feel because I went in knowing it was going to be silly, but I know it's a common complaint for people who don't like this story is that it is too silly. So I understand, even if I don't necessarily believe it myself, and so I'm including it on the dislikes as kind of a warning for people. The third dislike is that some of the characters limp along, specifically Arthur Dent. He's not really allowed time to acclimate appropriately, and because of that, he's constantly limping along with no breaks. This guy can't catch a break at all. And if he'd caught at least one break or acclimated a bit better, I feel like the flying by the seat of the pants would have gone over a little bit better with me. But sometimes I found he was just so overwhelmed that Arthur Dent was hard to read. That being said, that's it for my likes and dislikes. I'll now move on to my characters. All right, so there are 5 kind of main characters. There's 4 of them, and then there's Marvin. I'm not really going to talk about Marvin much. He wasn't as important or as fun to read. He was just a depressed robot. We'll start with Arthur Dent. He is a human of Earth. His home is being destroyed, and he is plucked off Earth by a good friend of his to survive via hitchhiking, as his home is being destroyed. He kind of discovered that the galaxy is bigger and fuller and crazier than he originally thought, and that's kind of how he gets carried through his adventures here. The second character I'm going to talk about is Prefect. He's an alien from a planet near Betelgeuse. That is the description from the book. And he poses out as an out-of-work actor, I believe. Can't remember. Out-of-work something. And what he actually does is he writes entries for the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which is in their universe, or their version of the universe. It's just like an encyclopedia for travelers. That being said, his big thing is that he plucks his friend off Earth to save him when Earth is being destroyed for an intergalactic bypass. Third is Trillian. She is also a human of Earth, and she decided to go on an exciting trip to see the galaxy with a kind of crazy but really interesting guy. She completely missed the destruction of Earth, and one of her big things in going was she's crazy brilliant, but she also recognizes that she wants more adventure than kind of the career she picked out for herself. She has degrees in, I think it's math and physics of some kind, so number heavy, and typically I wouldn't say it's a necessarily exciting career. So I get it. Who doesn't want to go off with a strange man in a spaceship? Sounds like fun. And then fourth, I'm going to talk about Zaphod Beeblebrox. He is a 2-headed, 3-armed president of the galaxy who's completely out to lunch, almost incompetent, really. And he is carrying out the most harebrained scheme to steal a ship with an infinity drive because he wants to find this weird lost planet to find this supercomputer there. And he is possibly the craziest of them all. And he happens to be, and I quote, a semi-cousin for Prefect. So it's convenient and weird and doesn't really do anything. It's just mentioned. So all these characters, describing them like this is to kind of compartmentalize them a little bit, to put them into easily identifiable slots. But honestly, they're all crazy, they're all wacky, they're all neurotic in their own way, and they're so much fun to read, and they play off of each other so well that it's highly entertaining. And if you're going to read this book, be prepared for some super goofy characters. That being said, that is kind of all I'm going to talk about with the characters. Like I said, I'm not really going to touch on Marvin because he's a little more one-dimensional. I will move into my wrap-up. I really recommend this book for people who think that extremely eccentric, goofy science fiction sounds like something they'd really enjoy. I think this is kind of one of those things, you'll either love it or you'll hate it. You'll love it that it doesn't take itself seriously and makes fun of itself and the tropes that are in it. Or you'll hate it because you think it's way too goofy and it's just not enjoyable because you can't take the characters seriously. Because when it comes right down to it, it's an insane adventure tied up into a sci-fi plot with Douglas Adams writing descriptions that are incredibly accurate, but they're also very wordy and very strange. But they're highly entertaining. And all of this comes together to give you a book that is 4.5 stars out of 5 for me. Like I said earlier, the rapid pacing, even if you had some sideways jumps instead of some forward jumps that would disorient you a little bit, the pacing was still really good. And even when you had the sideways jump and it pulled you out of the story a little bit, it would slam you back in very quickly and you would get back into the characters and just the goofy chaos surrounding them. Overall, this was just a really fun read. It's an interesting world. It's zany characters and crazy plots and harebrained schemes, and it's just because of how crazy and goofy it is, it's intriguing and entertaining and engaging the whole way through. I love sitting down and reading this book in a single sitting. It's just a good time. It's a good way to spend however long it takes you to read 180 pages. That being said, that's all I have to say today for the spoiler review of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!